Finance Committee meeting. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Here.
Dr. Mahoney. Mr. Peterson. Mrs. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Costin.
Costin, yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Redlinger.
Here.
Mr. Steen.
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn. Mayor Carlson.
Here.
Mrs. Reed. Ms. Madeira.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Don. Before we start, I want to make a couple of points. Commissioner Steen might have to be leaving us at about 4:30. He has a Fargo Dome Authority meeting. He's notified me to that effect, so we're glad that Rick is with us early on. Also, I'd like to introduce to the group Brandy. Brandy is the new finance director for Cass County, and she's joining us for the first meeting. So welcome, Brandy.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
The first order of business is to approve the minutes of November 17th. They have been distributed and they are on page 3.
Move to approve. Mahoney.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Steen, second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Third order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. We have some addendums that I'd like to point out to the Finance Committee. And this is with regard to the travels that some of our executive team had to DC. There are 2 items. We want to add an item number 7 to the agenda under the DA Board approval contract actions. And that's the dissemination of agent agreement with Collier Security LLC. This is a new agreement between the Metro Flood Diversion Authority and Collier Security for $700 through the end of the 2022 year. The scope of work for Colliers will be on file, and disclosures are required each year for the PABS bonds. And then also under item 8E is that some program information. Mr. Paulson will be talking about that. You'll notice that the talking points for December 2021 are not in the packet, and they will be in the packet for tomorrow's full board meeting. So looking for a motion to approve the order of the agenda with the amendments.
Jacobson, so moved.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second, please?
Steen, second.
I have a second by Commissioner Steen. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 4 is the approval of bills. We call on Mr. Kent Costin, Finance Director, City of Fargo. Mr. Costin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the bills list today, it looks like all of our stakeholders are actively engaged in working on the project, turning in expense totals of $10,584,745.94. Doesn't appear to be anything unusual on the list that you may have not seen before, so that would be the extent of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Are there any questions of Mr. Costin? Hearing none. This is a roll call vote. First, I need a motion for approval of the bills as presented by Mr. Costin.
Steen moves to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen. Is there a second, please?
Second, Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the bills. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Ms. Madrigal.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Motion passes. Next order of business is item number 5. It's a finance report. Again, we call on Mr. Costin, Finance Director for the City of Fargo. It is attached. It is on page 25. Mr. Costin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. With regard to the cumulative report, the 2021 spend total is $113,730,022. And the cumulative spend project to date is $760,193,573. That's on page 25. On page 26, the breakout of the two individual funds, there's $98.8 million in the diversion project fund, and there is $163,655 in that budget fund. The budget fund is the administrative fund that pays for the operating expense of the staff of the diversion. So a grand total of $98,984,816. And then if you go to page 27, this particular report was discussed at the last technical finance meeting with some of the officials of Jacobs. And we talked about collapsing this report because this report has been here since inception. And it's a bit redundant because it's also, Joel reports that out in his project report. So we think we may come forward with a recommendation to eliminate this report and add the revenue component of this report roll it into Director Paulson's report, just because it is somewhat redundant. So anyway, I just I throw that out there in case there are any questions. And I believe that Jacobs is working on formatting that into the project report. Other than that, the regular financial disclosures are included. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Any questions for Mr. Costin?
Steen has a question.
Please, Commissioner Steen.
This has probably been addressed, Kent, in the past, but back on page 25 of our PDFs, the bottom two lines, the other financing sources uses, what is that?
I think those are just entries that put us into compliance with the Master Indenture of Trust Agreement. We have to move money back and forth between various funds. They're not detailed on this report, so I can't immediately grab out and tell you what they are, but we formatted it this way because of the compliance with the MIT agreement. If you want me to dig in that and let you know more succinctly what it is and what it means, I'd be happy to do that.
Well, yeah, the reason I asked, it looks like there should be a balance of $329,000 somewhere, and that's what I was asking about.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll figure it out.
And any additional questions of Mr. Costin? Hearing none, this is an action item with a voice call vote. So all those in favor of approval of the finance report?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 6 is the Executive Director's financial report. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Chairman Dardis. On the first page here for the level 1 summary, I'll reiterate a little bit for what Mr. Costin just said. So if you look in the total bottom, actual expenditures to date, $760 million. You can see those broken out into our traditional categories. Again, everything seems to be online with the exception of the third-party MOU mitigation. You can see estimated completion was 27, and we are over that. And that has to do with settlement agreements and some MOU costs. Overall, though, project-wide, not necessarily concerning. Those were all approved actions by the board. But you can see a majority of our expenditures are in the lands and impacted property mitigation, as well as engineering and legal. And again, that is consistent with what we're seeing this year as well. When you move over to the columns on the right, the 21 annual budget and the 21 cost to date. Overall, we're still tracking significantly under budget for the year. And that was anticipated given some changes of when the P3 developer agreement was approved and when some of the lands and property acquisition was anticipated to be realized. So overall to date this year, we spent $130 million of our $219 million budget. And I'll move to the level 2 to provide some additional detail to the committee. And please stop me if anyone has any questions. So I'll go over this fairly quickly because this has been pretty consistent for the last few months. You can see diversion channel and associated infrastructure. We're at 11 million to date, and we were anticipating 35. Again, that was related to the timing of the procurement of the P3 developer, and that happening a bit later than what we had anticipated when we developed the 21 budget in 2020. Move on to the next page. And you can see here our mitigation project budgets, tracking as anticipated. We will be very close on many of those projects by the end of the year to what our anticipated budget was. We've now moved down to the in-town flood protection. Again, tracking a bit behind. Some of those will hit by the end of the year. But we will be fairly close to our $34 million budget for Fargo River Stage 37-foot projects. Continue to move down into lands acquisition and mitigation. Again, that's been moving along very nicely. We are keeping on schedule and keeping the core projects moving forward by acquiring the lands on time. The differences in the cost to date versus what our anticipated budget was basically just related to some transitioning of project schedules over the course of the year related to core funding and the like, which is going to cause us to be a bit under budget for the year on the lands and mitigation. But again, those costs will be either or have been added to the 2022 cost or cash budget. So we're still tracking overall on the lands and mitigation where we had intended to be. And the last page here is the engineering portion of the project. Again, a bit under budget from what we were anticipating. That's all good news, I think, as we move forward and we start to move more into construction. We're going to see a general ramp down on some of the engineering and design fees as we move forward. And then the PMC program support services, we got the legal and financial, and then the diversion authority operations. You can see those are under budget as well. I do anticipate our operational budget to be a bit closer to the 1 million mark. So we will be coming in under budget for our operations as well this year. So that's basically a summary of where we're at to date as of 11/26. And I will certainly entertain any questions or comments from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Mayor Mahoney has his hand up.
Joel, just going back to mitigation for Rich and Wilkin County. I know we were going to send them a $35 million check. I'm curious why the extra $250,000. What's that about?
Let's move back up to that. Let's see.
41.
Paul, would you be able to assist with that question?
That was the Buffalo Red check.
Oh,
for
thank you,
Buffalo Red
John.
Watershed District.
That's correct. So Mayor Mahoney, the settlement agreement was agreed with the Richland, Wilkin JPA, as well as the Buffalo Red Water Resource District and the cities of Comstock and Wolverton. And so we did agree to reimburse the Buffalo Red Watershed District legal fees. And that is what that $250,000 payment was allocated for.
And that's done and gone. And once we pay those legal fees, they will not get any other money from us in the litigation mitigation.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Mr. Paulson with regard to his financial report? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 7, the contracting actions. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one on the screen for you, and then I'll talk a bit and bring Mr. Shockley in if he wants to make a comment on the added item. The first item for the board's consideration is Work Package 50F agreement with Cass County Rural Water Resource District. So the Cass Rural Water obviously is being impacted by the program. This agreement would be for the capping of some of their water lines that are being severed by the channel. And so this would be the cost to perform that work.
All right. Thank you. And I'll remind you that we did amend this category and the next one.
The next one is a dissemination agent agreement. And so this is an agreement with Colliers Securities. We need somebody to provide some reporting for the PABS bonds that we made available to the Red River Valley Alliance. And this would be for those services. I consulted with Mr. Shockley, and we both believe that we can do this much cheaper by having Colliers do this, since they do this regularly for a lot of different entities versus us doing this internally. And the cost of this agreement would be for $700 for next year.
Move to approve. That's the cheapest bill you've had.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, if the mayor is indicating that we want to take these one at a time, so is that for item 1 and item 2, Mayor?
Yeah, and Bernie, I can wait till the end if you want. It was just, we rarely get a $700 bill.
As a matter of fact, let's move on to B, and we'll do them all at once if we can, please.
So that was item B, Mr. Chair, that Mayor Mahoney made the motion for. So item A would be the other item that would either need to be added or a motion made.
I would make the motion for A and B.
All right. Thank you. Is there a second, please?
Second, Costin.
Thank you. Second by Mr. Costin. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Dean.
Yes.
Mr. Petcoin.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Ms. Madriga.
Yes.
That is everyone.
As you can see, item B, there is nothing to report with regarding to the 2021 cash budget changes. So we'll move on to item number 8, other business. Please, Mr. Paulson.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just ask our general counsel for the final cash budget. Mr. Shockley, does that need to be approved by the Finance Committee prior to going to the board tomorrow?
Yeah, you should have a recommendation from the Finance Committee.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, on your agenda it says nothing to report. That was included because there have been no changes since this was considered by the Finance Committee at the last meeting. But we do have to take action on this to approve it and send the recommendation to the Diversion Board. So just to, I think we did not receive any questions over the last month from any of the Finance Committee or board members on the draft 2021 2022 cash budget. And so this would be for approval of that. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up here. It's under item 8A. So I'm not quite sure why item 7B is on there, really.
Please continue with item A under 8.
Okay, so the same thing applies to what I just mentioned for the 2022 cash budget. There were no changes from the draft budget that was presented last month. And so we do have the budget before the committee here today for approval and recommendation to the Diversion Board.
Are there any questions with regarding to the 2022 cash budget final report? As presented by Joel, it's in front of you. It is in your packet. It starts on page 70. Commissioner Steen and myself has had a number of meetings with the Jacobs, with Paul, with Martin Nicholson and Mr. Paulson, and Chairman has been involved as well. So there's been plenty of questions with regard to an explanation. So it has been vetted pretty thoroughly.
Move to approve.
Was that Mayor Mahoney?
Mahoney, yep.
Is there a second, please?
Jacobson, second.
Thank you, Dan. Mr. Jacobson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the 2022 cash budget as presented. Is there any other questions or any discussion? John, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Yes.
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Madriga.
Yes.
Everyone.
Thank you, Don. The motion passes. Joel, if you'd continue, or is John going to join us by phone?
I believe we have Mr. Shockley on the phone, so I'll let him discuss the resolution for contracting actions B and number C, DA approval for MOU.
Mr.
Yeah,
Shockley,
this is
please.
John. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually at the airport right now, returning a rental car, so I don't have it in front of me. But in summary, we had made a number of changes to the contracting resolution to bring it into conformance with a couple of things. Number one, how internally the process for approvals on the contracting actions occur. And the second was to update it. Instead of calling it a tag group, we call it the Member Entity Technical Review Group. And so it's not a significant number of substantive changes, but it is bringing it into conformance with our current contracting process.
Any questions of Mr. Shockley on item B?
Mr. Chair, this is Rick Steen.
Yes, Mr. Steen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, without any significant changes, there's a lot of things going on in that contract, and I don't know if you've got a red line copy or something that we could have looked at, because obviously reading through 25 pages of legalese was difficult. And I wasn't sure exactly what changed, what didn't change on that. I also asked our county administrator, Robert, to take a look at all the areas that require director or ask for deputy director written responses. Is that something new, or was that in there before?
We added that because there was a desire by the tag group that we were sending all contracts through the tag group, including administrative contracts. And so we changed the administrative contracts, which are non-technical in nature, to be reviewed by the two co-deputy executive directors.
Right, and I noticed, go ahead.
And there is a red line available, and we circulated it quite extensively with the tag group and also with the administrators, and everybody had provided comments. We certainly could, tomorrow I could certainly send out the red line version of the document.
Is this something that's significantly time sensitive, John, or could we have a while to take a look at this? Because I've asked Robert, there's a lot of references to the deputy directors having 2 days to provide any type of written response after they get the copy of the agreement. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Robert since we chatted briefly earlier today.
Yeah, I ultimately defer to Joel on the sensitivity of time. So I don't know, Joel, what's your view on the timeline? What I will say is that a lot of time was spent on everybody on reviewing it. So
yeah, as a finance committee member, I haven't had the opportunity to spend a lot of time on it reading through it, and I just like basically to take a quick look at what else has changed. And I don't know what the other changes are at this point without kind of taking a look at a red line or making some comparisons.
Yeah, I would defer to Joel on the timing.
Yeah, thanks, John and Mr. Steen. That's a good point. We do have timing involved in all of the contracting actions to ensure that we can, keep them moving through the process and get them executed and have them ready for the board packets if they are being recommended for approval. I would say, Mr. Steen, that we regularly, for larger agreements or more intensive agreements, we regularly need to take additional time, and sometimes that timing causes some of these agreements to take multiple months to work through the process. I think we wanted to put something in there that would, be an alert to say, okay, we haven't received this from the co-deputy executive directors. Let's check back in with them, see if they have any questions, see if they've gotten to it yet. But it's a way for us to track the progress of all of the contracting actions as they're going through. If we have some sort of way to have the AConnect system notify us if review hasn't been completed, or we need to call somebody and talk to them and let them know.
Joel, what I was getting at is this, how time sensitive is this for us to approve the changes of the process? That's all I was getting at. I know you guys have time sensitive issues, but having, I haven't had time to take a look at this. I'm not sure if Chair Dardis has had a significant time to look at this, and I know Robert hasn't. And then there's a fair amount of work related to the deputy directors or for them. I just would like to have a chance to take a look at this before voting on it. So my time sensitive issue is kind of wait for approval for the changes until January.
Understood, and I think that's perfectly fine, Commissioner Steen. There's nothing that's going to put us off schedule by making these changes, and I don't see any problem with that. We certainly want to ensure that you have the time to review and answer any questions that you have related to it. So I think that'd be a prudent course of action if the committee would like to defer.
Excuse me, Joel, that is a good idea. Rick and I talked earlier in the day, and I got through about the first 25 pages or so. And so I'm not all the way through the document either. So do we defer this to our January meeting? Do we pass this and with the stipulation that there additional review can be made, or how would you like to process this?
Mr. Chair, I would just recommend tabling this until the January meeting.
All right.
So
thank you. Mr. Steen moves. Is there a second? Is there a second?
It's not.
Motion fails due to the lack of a second. Someone had a comment. I didn't hear what it was. It is an actionable item. We have to take a roll call vote on this. So is there a motion to approve it?
Move to approve.
Is that Mahoney?
Mahoney, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Is there a second, please?
I would second, and just with that understanding that, we'll still be able to review it and bring it back if necessary.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Carlson. Then moved and seconded to approve the resolution for
Is that an amendment to the motion?
I apologize. Yes, that would be an amendment to the motion.
Well, I think that's a right that he has. Any of us have as members to amend it for next meeting. So I don't know that it has to be part of the motion. I think we always have that opportunity, don't we, John Shockley?
Yeah,
I'm going to follow the chairman's lead, and that we can bring it back if we find that there's something objectionable from the finance committee. So I'm going to.
Yeah, and this is John. Sorry to interrupt. It is a policy, so I mean, next month, if you wanted to change the policy, you could. It's just a policy, and so you can bring it up and change it at any time.
So the motion stands with Mayor Carlson's comments on the amendment, and I'm assuming that Mr. Mahoney, you made the original motion and you're all right with that amendment?
Chairman Dardis, I'm all right with that. And it makes me, with Commissioner Steen's concerns, I'll have to go back to Mike Berlinger and see what effects it has on him as well. So either one of us might bring back some amendments, but I think it's drafted okay at the present time.
All right, thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Cox,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Yes.
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Moving on to item C, the DA Board approved MOUs and agreement actions. John or Joel, I don't know who's taking that one.
John, if you don't have these in front of you, I can certainly take them.
Yeah, that would be great if you could take them, Joel.
Okay, no problem, no problem. So the first MOU we have before the Finance Committee for consideration is with the North Dakota DOT. And this MOU outlines the roles for the MFDA and the North Dakota DOT related to road and bridge facilities in conjunction with the channel project. So fairly lengthy, of course, but fairly standard. We have been working with the DOT for quite some time to get this MOU in place. I believe Mr. Bachigard is on the call. He has been also involved in the technical components of responsibility related to the MOU as well. So just looking for, approval of this MOU will allow us to reimburse North Dakota DOT costs related to their work necessary to continue to move forward with the DOT bridges and the interstate bridges, and then any outside consultant costs if necessary.
Move to approve Mahoney.
Can we take them all at once?
You're happy to support that motion?
All right. Why don't I just explain the other ones here and then we can move forward. So the next one is a MOU with the city of Horus for the Southern Embankment. And that really, again, outlines responsibilities between the city, the U.S. Corps of Engineers, and the MFDA. This is also another item that we've been working on for quite some time with the city of Horus. And both John Shockley and Mr. Chris Bachigard have really been running this one to ground. The next one is a MOU with the city of Horus for the diversion channel construction. Very similar to the Southern Embankment agreement, and outlines the roles and responsibilities between the two different entities. And then the third MOU is with Polar Communications. And that is a MURA for the relocation of utilities related to the channel component of construction. So those are the four MOUs before the Finance Committee today.
Thank you, Joel. Is there any questions on any of them? And if you have a question, please indicate if it's item 1 through 4. Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the 4 MOUs at one time.
Move to approve all four, Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Is there a second, please?
Redlinger, second.
Thank you, Mr. Redlinger. It's been moved and seconded to approve the DA MOUs and agreement actions, items 1 through 4, as presented by Mr. Paulson. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Coxton,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Yes.
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Next order of business is item D. It's the Metro Flood Diversion Authority 2022 public meeting calendar. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just for your information. We are providing this in the packet. This does provide the committee dates for the 2022 calendar year. So this is for your information to be able to get those meetings put into your calendars. Yeah, I'll certainly take any questions, or if everyone's fine. This is very similar to how we've run meetings the last few years. Basically, the committee meetings on the Wednesday prior to the diversion board meetings on the Thursday. So, any questions?
Questions for Mr. Paulson? Thank you. Item E, program information points, December 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as you had mentioned at the start of the meeting, we will be providing these to the board tomorrow. This is kind of picking up where we left off a little bit ago on providing talking points to the board members related to different aspects of the program. And so these will be updated on a quarterly basis and distributed to the board. I think it really helps to just make sure everyone is aligned on where we're at with all of the different components, and then understanding what's changing over the course of a few different months. And then also, if a board member gets questioned on a certain item, they can use this as an informational sheet to be able to see what that current status is. So again, just for your information today for the committee, but this is a practice that we had in the past, and it was requested to bring this back by a few different board members. And so we will be distributing these out at the board meeting tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Any questions on that? Does any member from the Finance Committee have any additional items they'd like to bring forward this afternoon? Mr. Paulson, anything additional that you have?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
All right, Mr. Shockley?
Well, Joel, Mayor Mahoney or Bernie, I think, Joel, don't you get to tell us that you got us the 180 million? You were out in Washington?
Well, thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Yes, we were in Washington this week. We did not get confirmation on the $180 million request, but we did have Chair Carlson, myself, Mr. Nicholson, and Mr. Shockley did have a meeting with Senator Klobuchar and Senator Hoeven with Ms. Shalonda Young, who is the OMB director. I'll report to the Finance Committee. The meeting went extremely well. A little bit about Ms. Young. She is from Baton Rouge. Her home was destroyed by a flood when she was a young child. And she was also very involved on Capitol Hill with emergency response through FEMA. And so she understands flooding. She understood the project right away when we started talking about it. And basically we kind of got a no surprise commitment from her. And so we do believe we'll continue to be in coordination with OMB as they make their decisions on the infrastructure legislation that recently passed, in which we hope to achieve the $180 million request to keep the Corps of Engineers on schedule and get that Red River control structure bid out here this spring.
I heard that John Shockley, being a Tulane graduate, charmed her, and then that Shelley Carlson invited her to some bar in Moorhead. I heard it went very well.
You are correct, Mayor Mahoney. Your sources are correct.
So Mayor Carlson, as chairman of the board, would you like to make any comments about your trip?
Thank you, Mayor Dardis. Yes, the trip went extremely well. Senators Klobuchar and Senator Klobuchar and Senator Hoeven, as everyone knows, are very involved in this project and are strong advocates for making sure that this project stays on schedule. And that was communicated in various ways and in various depictions of perhaps, Fargo or Grand Forks' picture of them flooding with the downtown on fire as a way to really demonstrate and and underscore how vitally important flood control is. I would concur with Mr. Paulson that given the fact that she's from Louisiana, she has a very in-depth understanding of flooding and what it does to communities. So it was very good. They spent 40 minutes with us, which is quite unheard of, but it was wonderful.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next Finance Committee meeting will be January 26th. And if no one from the Finance Committee or Mr. Paulson has anything additional, we'll see you tomorrow at the board meeting. That is in person. A reminder, that is in person at Fargo City Hall. And we stand adjourned. Thank you for your participation.